Welcome to DVD number 3 of Event Hacks. Fill, market, and monetize every time. In this session, you'll hear Dan cover in detail the different reasons people do make the effort to join you at your events. He'll lay out the 5 specific factors involved in making that decision. Incredibly valuable as you craft your event marketing plan. In addition, he'll reveal some keys to planning your marketing that ensure it's delivered in the most effective manner possible. And now, GKIC is very pleased to bring you Dan Kennedy, describing why they will come.
So the reasons why people come, the leverage you have, these are sort of the inverse of reasons why people don't come. So one, which is often undervalued, is the relationship you have with the customer. I mean, ultimately, people come to events in large part because they want to be there with the people who are going to be there. So they come because they want to sit at the feet of the master. So there is a guru, mentor, celebrity, personal relationship that is in place and is maintained and is nurtured, and it has both implicit and explicit leverage. And so people come, for example, to our events, to GKIC events, in part because it's their periodic reconnect opportunity with me. And that's not accidental. You know, that relationship exists in between those months in a way that motivates that attendance. And if that is strong, it's great leverage. If it's weak, it's not great leverage. And if the relationship is actually poor, then you're trying to overcome bad relationship with content and other reasons, you know, to be there. The other people matter. So again, people come because they want to be with the people who are there. So are the people there appropriate, right? Meaning, if I'm a millionaire, I don't want to be in a room with poor people. If I'm a smart person, I don't want to be hanging around with dumb people. If I'm an extremely ambitious person, I don't want to be hanging around with lazy people, and vice versa, by the way. If I'm a high social values person, I don't want to be hanging around with people who I perceive to have very low morals and poor character, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's this fraternal, event marketers overuse the word networking, but there's this fraternal aspect, this social, if you will, aspect to events. There's who's in the exhibit hall, who's there as a vendor. Is it just anybody who can write a check? Are they vetted? Are they? So all of the who matters, not just the what. And we tend to overfocus on the what. What's the subject matter? What's the content? What are the presentations? Is there a meal? Is there not a meal? And underfocus on the who reasons to be at an event. There is obviously the what, the content, the subject matter, the expertise, the access, and so little things like, do you get to get your picture taken with the master at whose feet you like to sit? Do you get to get your picture taken with the celebrity? Do you get to ask questions? Do you not get to ask questions? So there's this whole access issue that comes into play. there is the weighting of information and entertainment. And generally speaking, the bigger the number you want present, the broader your subject matter, the less specific it is in personal relevance to the attendee, the more entertainment matters. So, you know, it's an interesting irony of the business. So the irony of this business is that if I'm doing a relatively small meeting, let's say 50 people, and it's very high-level training on a very advanced and personally relevant topic to them, I can usually charge a lot of money, and I can deliver almost nothing but that content. So no frills, doesn't make any difference, right? We don't even have to feed them if we don't want to. You're on your own, be back at 3, okay. Nobody's going to complain that there weren't 5 varieties of tea. They actually will bring a pad and a pen. You don't need to give it to them. You can have it in a just ordinary, like, airport hotel. Doesn't matter, right? The broader the subject matter, the bigger the number of people I want there. Now, I have to charge them a lot less, and now all that stuff matters. And they'll all be peeing and moaning that there weren't clowns and music and dancing acts and 5 different buffets and goodie bags, and they'll be disappointed without any of that. So you have to figure out what the weighting is between core content and entertainment. But you ought not underestimate the need to be in the entertainment business, to deliver a experience, not just a download of information. And that really is, that's really the crux of the matter, is why should I come has to in part be answered by things you can't get by not coming. And so the core content part of an event can be gotten by other means. Books, resources, YouTube videos. At my mid-year event this year, 2016, at my June event, a guy there had driven, 3 days and 2 nights to get there, so he'd stayed in a hotel 2 nights. He had a lot of time on his hands. And he said he had binge-watched 22 hours of me on YouTube on his way. Apparently, he'd never heard of, like, House of Cards. But of course, my first concern is, imagine how many people who can binge watch 22 hours of me don't need to be now feel they don't need to be at an event. And that really is the point, you know. What is there that is going to happen that will be part of your experience at an event that cannot be replicated by watching it as a live stream, by getting it productized afterwards, by getting resources of the speaker or speakers who are presenting at the event? So that argument has to be made as expansively as possible, which now involves entertainment, it involves fraternity, it involves exhibitors, it involves the argument about just being away from your own environment and in a different environment triggers creative impulses. That argument has to be made as strenuously and expansively as possible, because really the only reason to be at an event is for the things you can't get any other way. So for example, I mean, I've lived in event marketing all these years, and I do a lot of it. And with each passing year, I like going to any less. And I never really did. I lost interest very early on for all of the reasons not to go. It's not time efficient. You sit through a bunch of nonsense in order to get 5 gems. And so if I can get that information by any less aggravating, time-consuming ways, I'll prefer to get it that way, right? So you have to make an argument to me that you may be able to get the information, but the information is only part of this collection of experiential reasons to be here, any one of which might actually be the most important benefit that you take home. And so we talk about things like what goes on in the hall might actually prove more significant to you than what goes on in the meeting room. What you think is more important than what people say. There's about certain speakers, you may be able to see or hear their speech, particularly people that are sort of one-trick ponies or two-trick ponies or three-trick ponies, but you won't have been in the room with them live, maybe ask them a question, maybe got an autograph, and if they're important enough to you, maybe you want to do that at least once in your life, right? I mean, so, Sinatra never did anything in a live performance that was not on a record, now a CD, nothing. It's not like he reserved 5 songs that he never recorded and only performed live, but a whole lot of people at least wanted to see him once. There's a big event, I just wrote about it for the Affluent Letter. There's a big music festival company. And for the first time this year, they are doing a 2-weekend come and camp out music festival for the boomer and senior audience. So the acts are all McCartney and the Rolling Stones and Neil Young and so forth. But it's like Woodstock, it's in this big area and people, but it's boomer and senior. So you rent a tent for $1,600. You rent a really nice tent for $16,000. Law enforcement is gearing up, not really for a lot of drug incidents, but for heart attacks and strokes and hip injuries. And, so the whole thing is, being run very differently. But it has done $50 some odd million in ticket revenue plus everything else it's going to do. And it will be their most profitable, even though the acts are getting paid between 10 and 20 million apiece. So it's not ticket revenue, it's net, excuse me. So their net's going to be 50 mil, I think is what they projected in the Wall Street Journal, which will be their most profitable, event ever. In the big long Wall Street Journal article, one of the telling statements, somebody who's registered and is attending, said, I'm really not all that motivated to go and see the acts. I have seen them all 3 or 4 times in my lifetime live, and the last time I was kind of disappointed with every one of them because after all, they're in their 70s, right? He said, but to have this whole experience once and to be able to tell the tale, I find irresistible. And that's really where we have to be with most of our events. The exceptions are the very specifically purposed. All this still applies, but it applies smaller. So if you take something like a fast start event, because that is so specifically purposed, is you have bought X you now want to be able to use X as effectively as possible, as quickly as possible. And so you're going to come, and for 2 days, we're going to unpack it all and do it with you. And you're going to walk out of the room with A, B, C, D, and E built and up and running. Well, that alone, it may be a compelling enough pitch. On the other hand, it might be helped by, and oh, by the way, Johnny Bench, the famous baseball player, is going to be there and do a little talk at lunch, and everybody's going to get an autographed ball. That might provide more than enough incremental attendance to justify Johnny Bench's fees. So you think through all of this, and if every registration counts, if every butt in the seat matters, to whatever financial level it matters, you want to do everything possible to create encouragement to attend. So when you do the preparation to market an event, you wind up with a tabletop full of features and benefits. So you have usually speakers, you have subjects, you have sessions, you have relationship, you have, you need to be there because everybody else in your business comes. So you have this, what most copywriters call raw material. You have this pile, stack, box, table, full of features of the event, benefits of the event, reasons to attend the event, reasons not to attend, to dispense with, objections and skepticisms to fix. So you have all this stuff. Now you want to try and organize it. And sort of the two approaches are ranking by importance, so that you determine what you're going to give more emphasis to and less emphasis to, which then may determine what's on page 1 and what's on page 5, what is going to get its own webcast, what is not. So there's the ranking. And in most cases, that's variable by audience segment, which might be by size of business, by type of business that are all coming to the same event. It might be by behavior. They've been to past events, they missed last year's, they've never been to an event, they're new, they're old. It might be by geography, they're here, they're overseas. These items may rank differently for different groups of possible attendees. In fact, might's the wrong word. They do rank differently for different groups of potential attendees. Whether or not you choose to create verticals or not, or the size of your list allows, is another topic, but they do. So one issue is ranking them by relative importance to determine how much attention they get in the storytelling about the event. Then the other way to leverage it is in sequential terms. So if we have a fairly long sales cycle months, not weeks, which for anything but local we ought to have. If we have a fairly long sales cycle, then we can look at these things, and individually or in groupings, we can put them in an order in which we're going to show them to people. Because often, if we throw everything at them all at once, they can't really process it all. It's the problem, not that it negates their value, but with, say, the 48-page sales letter. The problem is always at page 16, do they remember the 5 key points you made by page 10? And by the time they get to page 30, do they remember? Right. So usually for an event, there are a lot of reasons to be there. If there's multiple speakers, really every speaker is an event in and of him or herself to be talked about and promoted. If there's key features where, I don't know, there's a scavenger hunt in the exhibit hall, there's a meet and greet with a, so those things sort of deserve their own moment in the sun in a marketing cycle. So the second thing we do for leverage is now we put them in order of what are we going to reveal first, what are we going to reveal second, what are we going to reveal third. In some cases, we may even choose to hold something back that is planned from the very beginning for late in a marketing cycle as a good excuse for another outreach. Oh, just added, this is happening. Just added, this person is coming. And so that's the second way to get leverage. Here's the thing. People tip over. So let's take a TV infomercial. People think of a television infomercial as broadcasting. And so it's one big message broadcast to one big audience. And it is that. But also, the audience watching that infomercial in Columbus, Ohio at 1 o'clock in the morning on Thursday may be a couple hundred people. And we're going to sell to 20 of them. Almost without exception, all 20 are going to be tipped over the edge to buying by 20 different things. One saw somebody that looks like them, and their husband's a firefighter, and that testimonial's husband is a firefighter. Another one is tipped over by a particular scientific fact from a study done at Stanford, and her kid now goes to Stanford, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So getting people to come to an event out of a market, out of an audience, out of a list, is really the same sort of thing. Different people's tipping point. It's not the thing that causes it alone, would not cause them to come. But it is the thing that tips them over the edge and gets them to come. I once flew all the way across the country on a red eye, had to rent a helicopter when we landed to get to the hotel, paid a lot of money for a full day event. Really, there was one speaker that I wanted to hear and that I wanted to see. And that happens a lot. I can tell you in the GKIC world, at our super conference, if you look at the entire history of them, the person who had the greatest direct impact on attendance, anecdotally, by what attendees said, that it was the nudge, the thing that tipped him over was Gene Simmons. At the time, his reality show was on A&E. It's now on some obscure station nobody's ever heard of, if it's still on the air at all. But at the time, it was on A&E, and it was kind of a big deal. Plus, our audience, again, gray hair for the most part, and they kiss, that's their era. And the opportunity to be in a room with him in person and hear him and get a picture taken. People brought objects to be autographed. One guy brought a box of 8-track tapes to be autographed, which Gene graciously autographed the 8-track tapes. So you couldn't have said, we're doing a seminar and the only thing we're going to tell you about it is Gene Simmons is going to be here and here's what he's going to talk about. You would not have put 800 people, whatever it was, in that room on that. But you probably had 80, 100 of them who would not have been there were it not for that nudge. You have people who are there very specifically because of vendor search. It's an efficient way for them to see new technology, new suppliers, and that really is why they've come. There are events that's it for me. I mean, now I'll go to some sessions once I'm there, and I'll be at the cocktail party once I'm there. But what has caused me to make the decision to come has been actually the exhibit hall. And so you're really knocking pins down one at a time, not all the pins with one big bowling ball. And you have to be really cognizant of that when you build the event and when you build this table of stuff, and then how you rank it and how you present it and when you present it. Repeat attendees. So first of all, they can repeat two things. Many businesses will have at least some or one institutionalized annual event. Regardless of what we call it, it's really the equivalent of a member or customer or subscriber convention. And there are specific reasons to attend conventions that don't necessarily apply to other kinds of events. So people come back to conventions year after year after year, to some extent because it's the thing to do. If you are a professional speaker, you go to the National Speakers Convention every year because it's the thing to do. And that's a great point of leverage. Your repeat attendee to varied events. So when you put on a seminar about X, a boot camp about Y, you're going to take a group on a field trip to hither and thon. You're doing a really high-end advanced training, and you have repeat attendees for those. That's a little less organic. It's a little less naturally occurring. And so the bar to make that happen is a little higher. The best things to get repeat attendance. The first best thing is to sell what's next while they're at one. There is almost no better place to sell an event than in the middle of an event that's going very well, that people are very happy being at. This is simply Sales 101 applied to the event business. So in selling anything, a profound question is, when is the customer happiest? Often, by the way, it's when the customer gets their thing. So an IKEA buyer is happiest at point of purchase. They are not happiest at point of put it together. 30% of all divorces in America are caused by IKEA. So, you know, if you want to sell something else to an IKEA buyer, you sell it to them before they've opened the box of the thing they already bought. They're in the in-store experience. They've finally settled on something. They're happy. Their anticipation's high. So this exists in every business, right? The time to sell the next reservation at a very expensive restaurant is while the people are right there and they've had a great dinner and they've had a great bottle of wine and they're friends, because 2 weeks later they might think twice about how often they want to go back and pay that kind of money. So for events, the best time to sell the next event is in the middle, give or take, of an event they are at that's going very well. In many cases, particularly if there's incentive, financial or bonus or something, that sales process is kind of simple and abbreviated. Its language is, you know, how many of you have 22 ideas or more that you're going to go home and implement, and you think at least each one is worth $10,000 to you? And everybody raises their hand and they're enthusiastic, and we pass the mic to 5 or 6 people who tell about the best idea they got yesterday, and then we say, well, obviously you're all going to want to be at the next event, and here's the forms, and everybody that signs up now gets a free stuffed rabbit, and that's almost all you have to say if their enthusiasm is very, very high and they're at an event that's going very, very well. Also, of course, the best person to sell an event to is the person who's at an event. We already know they'll come. We already got them past once a bunch of their obstacles to attending. They already know how to attend. They know how to get to the airport. They know how to get on an airplane. They know how to make a hotel reservation. They know how to pack a bag. They know how to handle the conversation with the spouse. They already know how to do all that stuff. So the best person to sell an event to is the person who's at an event. Sort of the best, if you have multiple events, is selling a multiple event package to somebody who's at an event, so that instead of dealing with 4 buying decisions, we're really only dealing with 1. Often this will put a multiple month time period into, which allows us to do easy pay, at least offer it, so that they're not having to make a $1,000 decision or $2,000 decision or $3,000 decision. They're really making the monthly payment a decision, right? So that's the best way to get them back. It can't go without saying that they have to be having a terrific experience. And if you don't sell them there, and your question now is, we had a bunch of people at an event a year ago and now we want to sell them this event. Not only did the experience they had matter, but remember, it's largely forgotten. So it has to be recreated in their mind's eye. The experience they had at the last event is, of course, extremely relevant, but it has faded. And often, what sticks in the memory longer is kind of unpleasant and inconvenient rather than pleasant and exciting. So they will, what leaps to their mind first is like the 2 delayed flights and the 6 hours they spent sitting in the Kansas City airport, more so than how cool the event was. So we have to recreate their experience in their mind's eye. We have to do that with sales copy. We may do that with video. We may do that with audio. We may do that with testimonials. However, when there's elapsed time, the other thing that comes into play is, did they get any actual value out of the event? So when we're selling the next event to people who are at this event. We have emotion and impulse on our side. So essentially having a good time, having creative thoughts, enjoying the fraternity. Oh, it's cool to be in a room with so-and-so. That's working for us. And that may be all that's required for a desire to be at the next one. We also have physicality to work to our advantage, so we can create a stampede with the first 50 people who run to the back of the room and register for the next event, get the free stuffed rabbit. There's peer pressure that occurs with that, et cetera, et cetera. That now goes away when we're selling at a distance and we have elapsed time that has occurred. Therefore, that probably won't be enough. Now we have the issue of, after the joy of the moment dissipated and they returned to real life, do they have anything to show for having been at the event? Did they make money? Did they lose weight? Did they fix their marriage? Whatever it is that was supposed to happen, has it in fact happened? Now is an issue, which makes what that mandates. If we know, this gets easier. It gets all the way down to individual sales messages. You know, hey, Bob, here's your report to us 3 months after the event, and you did this, and you did this, and you did that. But if we don't know, now we have to assume Bob did nothing and has nothing to show for having been at the event. But we have to demonstrate to him with such overwhelming preponderance of proof from other people's success stories and other people's testimonials and other people's copies of checks they made, houses they bought, befores and afters of weight they lost, that he's like the only nitwit who was there who didn't get a result, which is all the more reason he needs to be at the next event. So when we're selling at the event, we can usually get away with the leverage of the event experience itself. When we're selling after elapsed time, the next event, we have to recreate those feelings, plus we have to deal with the issue of, do I have anything to show for having gone to the last event?
Getting customers to your event does require effort, but it's going to be much easier once you put into action the insights Dan described on this DVD. In our next session on DVD number 4, Dan digs deep into the critical topic of lists and list segmentation. There are many ways to slice and dice a list. Dan will reveal not only how to do this, but also cover strategies on customizing the message to make it even more appealing. Best of all, he explains everything in a clear, easy-to-grasp manner that you can put to use immediately. So check it out right away. Thank you for listening to this GKIC program.